welcome to another exciting episode of the Comic Book Chronicles. I am your host for tonight, Roddy Cat. You can find me. I'm sorry, I'm looking at the preview on YouTube, and the thing you just did was kind of funny. Anyway, I am your host, Roddy Cat. You can find me at Roddy Cat on Twitter. You can also find me at News Nerds Need on Twitter. You can also find me at CBCaps on Instagram. And with me tonight is the man with the sound effects, our man in Brooklyn, Agent_70 on Twitter and Instagram.
What's up, everybody?
Where Brooklyn at? Where Brooklyn at? Where Brooklyn at?
I'll tell you where we at. We on quarantine.
There we are. And not with us tonight, before I actually get this link to this thing that'll probably cause a sound effect in itself. PC_Dirt, who is not here tonight. You can find him at PC_Dirt on Twitter. You can also find him at popculturenetwork.com and popculturenet on Twitter. You can also find him at his umbrella site there. And you can also find him on Byte, the new Vine replacement, under comic book reviews with no vowels. And not with us tonight, but chiming in. Okay.
Sorry about that.
That's all good. Not with us tonight, but chiming in, as you may or may not have heard, is one Tim DOGG98 on Twitter, CB Cron on Twitter, which is the Comic Book Chronicles Twitter account, The Click Nation and theclicknation.com. That's TheKlickNation. Also, you can find him over at Comic Book Resources, where he's over there writing his face off. And you can find this here podcast on the Cold Slither Podcast Network, that's CSPN.us.
Do it today.
And you could also find us at your podcast perusal place of choice, such as Google Play, Apple iTunes, aka Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and the Cold Slither Podcast Network's SoundCloud page. For some strange reason, I kind of figured that would be the book that Tim would like, but we'll get into that a little bit later. A little tease for a little later on in the show. But for right now, we are going to get into the books of the week, starting off with Road to Empyre. That's EMPIY, number 1, which is the new event book that has just started.
Well, yeah, the event itself is actually upcoming. So this is the well,
yeah, I guess you could say this is like the prelude to it. I guess so. Yeah.
Right, because I think it's about to start, because I think just previous to this we had something that showed us how Hulkling is about to start the gears turning on Empire. And this is another, like you said, a prelude to that happening. And what's great about this, and this book serves several purposes. It's written by Robbie Thompson, with art by Mattia De Ulis for the present day stuff, and Javier Rodriguez and Alvaro Lopez doing the flashback sequences. What's great about this book is that, as I said, it serves several purposes. One, it helps to, again, set more of the stage for Empire. 2, it gives us a real history lesson for several important cosmic events in the history of the Marvel Universe, that if you are under the age of, Roddy Cat and I were talking about this just before we started, if you're under the age of even 35, there's no way, unless you have been a very fervent reader of Avengers and even FF stuff on Marvel Unlimited, or have been collecting back issues for ages, or trade paperbacks for ages, there's no way you'd be familiar with the events that are recounted in this issue. That, the events of the Kree Skrull War, the events of the Celestial Madonna saga. This is stuff that myself and Roddy Cat read about in our official handbooks of
Yeah.
the Marvel Universe. This is not stuff we're reading
Yeah,
as it
and
was
well,
coming out.
actually, well, you're right about that. But the Kree Skull War, like, I did actually go back and read that somewhere. It's weird because it's like I read it in the handbook, definitely, and then some event kind of I remember when I was little, some event called to it, and then I went back and read it somehow, some way. Because you didn't have Marvel Unlimited back then.
Exactly. I mean, when we were younger, when we were teenagers, there were a couple of Marvel cosmic crossovers, like Galactic
Hmm.
Operation Galactic Storm. There's there and a few others that touched upon aspects of the Kree Skrull War. And obviously, if you read the Death of Captain Marvel graphic novel, they I think discussed a little bit of
Hmm.
it just in flashback. So obviously, at the end of the day, we had snippets. And what I appreciate about them putting this issue out is that it definitely, in the um, in the act of telling a present day story involving these Skrull infiltrators on Earth, the Warners, not Yakko, Wacko, and Dot, but another family called the Warners. And shout out to an old coworker of mine whose name was also Carl Warner,
Oh
who's
no.
who's one of these now former Skrull infiltrators. You have to read this issue. That's a very minor spoiler, but I think it's more of a spoiler for the previous Skrull. I forget what the name of
Meet
the
the
title was.
Scrolls.
Meet the
Hmm.
Skrulls. Okay, so that's a minor spoiler for the Meet the Skrulls miniseries, and um, in the course of helping us to catch up with these Warners, the is it the it's the mom and three daughters, and in the course of catching up with them, they are on a quest to figure out one, who tried to ace them, who tried to whack them, and two, they also get a garbled partial message from beyond space, and they don't know who it's from. And as they're trying to decipher what it means and where and who it's from, they take us down, well, not memory lane so much for the kids or even for the mother, but just giving us the history lesson of the Kree Skrull War, the Celestial Madonna saga, and even um what is it? It's a Fantastic Four story where a Kree and a Skrull in the midst of the trial of the
Hmm.
Phoenix basically are in a fight to the death, and it's just kind of silly. Um, so ultimately, um, we go down this. We get this history lesson, and we find out at the end that it all ties very neatly together into the lead into Empire.
Yeah, and most likely will be brought up again, given that all of this stuff had come back. Now, and the other good thing about this book is that if you did not know any of this stuff, there are footnotes in it a little bit, but there's also in the back of the book, they basically tell you what issues, all of this stuff is coming from, including that Avengers Fantastic Four thing, which I totally didn't remember anything about, with the Kree and the Skrull fighting. So, because again, it was a little before our time. So, but it was good stuff all the way around. Like I said, the history lesson, even stuff that I vaguely remember, because I do remember the celestial Madonna stuff because I was reading Avengers and had definitely had gone back and read that stuff, or probably even read it at the time. Actually, I don't remember when that part. But it was probably like late 70s when that thing happened, so it might have been a little bit later. Anyway, when that happened, and the whole thing with Mantis and Swordsman and their kid, and I was like, oh shoot, I forgot they had a kid. So it was like, and then going to do a little bit of research into what happened to that kid since then, you know, um, leading up to this, or at the very least since then, not necessarily leading up to this, but like, okay, that person's shown up a couple of different times and that I did not read about. So yeah, this is if definitely. Oh, and actually, the only thing I don't remember about it, the message they end up hearing that is garbage is the message. I'm fairly certain it is the message that we hear from whatever one shot that was that basically that basically kind of preluded all of the events that are coming that were coming this week, and I can't
Correct.
remember what that was called, but that I think that I'm fairly certain that message was in there from Hulkling, who's involved with it,
Hmm.
and that's who they see this message from.
Exactly.
So, like I said, if you are interested in Empire, you definitely pick this one up for the history lessons therein and anything that's going to be coming into this. I mean, into that from this.
Right. Yeah, this is the Cliff Notes version. If you are interested in reading the full version, as Roddy Cat mentioned, conveniently at the end of this issue, there are notes as to which story arcs you can read to catch up and really read it in full, whether through Marvel Unlimited or through trade paperbacks.
As a matter of fact, I believe it actually says. I'm gonna check the back of the book real quick. It says, see, no. Let's see. Oh yeah, you can find these in trade paperback or on Marvel Unlimited. So yeah, and I knew the Young Avengers one was in there, but the rest of the stuff I did not, or a couple of these other ones I didn't expect to be there.
Right. I mean, Young Avengers is the only book that I bought and read in real time of these three. So of these three story
Right.
arcs, that 4 story arcs, I mean, that they recommend that people read to get up to speed on the events of the and things thereafter that are going to lead into Empire.
So yeah, there is that.
Yeah, but definitely, as Roddy Cat said, if you're looking to get up to speed, this is recommended. I enjoyed reading this. The art by Mattia de Iula was sharp and spot on. And what was great about the flashback sequences is that the art is so different that you realize it's a flashback sequence.
Right, because there is a definite classic sense to the art and the flashback sense. The flashback part, excuse me. So.
Sure.
I was like, all right, yeah, it was just stuff definitely, if not taken from, then definitely reminiscent of, the art that would have been in the original sources. And actually, weirdly enough, made me want to go back and finish reading Meet the Skrulls, because I started reading it and I think I read the second issue, and then and then everything else just came out, and I was like, okay, I don't even know anymore. So.
If it's on Marvel Unlimited, I can read it as well now.
More than likely on that one probably is, but at this point, because I know they've been good about doing more recent stuff, like 4 to 6 months after the fact. So there is a very good chance of that. So let us move on to the next book, and I guess we can kind of sort of keep to a space theme with Black Panther number 22, I guess.
Absolutely.
So in this issue, and speaking of things that they got recalled, so there was a couple of recalls in this one that I was like, I was not expecting him to actually bring that back up. So
I can confirm that Meet the Skrulls is on Marvel Unlimited.
He has all this unlimited power.
Unlimited power with the sparkly fingers.
But yeah, it is definitely a good resource for just for, especially with what we do. But not even then, it's like if you're interested in the history of a lot of the books, as it were, a lot of that old stuff they've been fairly decent about putting in there. But anyway, Black Panther number 22. So in this issue, Black Panther is still in the Djalia, and he's still fighting. Well, he starts fighting his ancestry for, I don't even remember the reasonings why, but nevertheless, he ends up doing that. But on the outside of that, Bast is seemingly making talking to one of the enemies, and looks to have possibly made an ally of said enemy, unbeknownst to anybody else going on around. And then at the end of the issue, in a nutshell, people start getting their memories back, weirdly enough. So I guess all of that is kind of playing in together. But the crux of the story is Black Panther and the Djalia fighting his ancestors, and kind of being called on decisions he's made in the past, such as stuff that had to do with Infinity, AVX, obviously most notably with the annulment of his wife Storm, and some decisions he's made during the incursions there in during
Sure, and the Illuminati.
exactly. So it was like,
That was great. I love. There were some great remarks.
mm-hmm.
I believe it was most likely from T'Chaka, his father, who was like, whatchamacallit, no friendship too precious to be spurned. I was like, oh snap!
Yeah, I was like, yeah, because
There's
I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, I said just there's the guilt trip.
Yeah. Yeah, so it was like, oh man, like I said, during the course of this whole thing, it was like, okay, he's just doing the thing, and then all this gets brought up. I was like, oh snap, they brought all that back up.
Oh,
Like, all right, let's go.
yeah.
So yeah, all of that was great. Great.
Yeah, if there's one thing, hold that thought. If there's one thing that I've noticed about Coates's writing in both Black Panther and Captain America is that he is not shy about digging into Marvel lore and history.
That's good. That's great.
It all weaves together, and it's what it is it's evident that he is a fan, that he's been a fan, that he knows from what he speaks. He has that depth of knowledge, and obviously even with the digital resources that we all have, it seems like he's coming at it from a point of familiarity, and that's
I
great.
kind of wonder, and I've been wondering for a while because like this book, and yeah, that being the case, and that aside, like there have been a lot of books that's been, and we've remarked on this before, that have been pulling some deep cuts out there for one reason or another. And I don't know. I was kind of wondering if that was some sort of mandate. Just like, hey, we got this whole Marvel history. Like, yes, it's 80-year history. Now, I'm not saying that was the reason why everybody's pulling that. They've been doing it for the last couple of years. But I wonder if they're just like, look, the gates are open. Use what you need to. Pull the stuff out of, just pull the stuff out if you need it. It's like, we got all this history. You might as well use it.
Right. I mean, there's so like we're sort of used to seeing that from people like, as much as we don't like some of the things that Nick Spencer does with the characters, he definitely is well versed in his Marvel history. Obviously, so is Dan Slott, so is Jonathan Hickman. But for someone like Ta-Nehisi Coates, who's not as known for his comic book writing, that's why I bring it up more so than I would with any of the other comic book writers, because he's obviously a famous and established writer in his own right outside of comics, and that's why it's remarkable to me to see the depth of his history knowledge, of his historical knowledge of the Marvel universe, and that that gives me gives me tons of joy. I'm trying to come up with the right turn of phrase, but it gives me it just gives me a lot of joy to see that in someone who is so well known for writing
traditional prose.
Points. Yeah, no, I was about to say pieces of fact, prose, and nonfiction. To have that deep,
and I would imagine,
knowledge.
and he would probably say so himself. Like coming from that background, probably sets you up for it, because you kind of have to do, depending on what you're writing on, especially, you kind of have to do some research on some things. So I would imagine, yes, his love of the source material aside, there is definitely a good bit of research that he's had to kind of pull in outside that. Yeah, so to prepare him to write this stuff. So either way, it still works out in everybody's favor, because it's good stuff all the way around. I think that's pretty much it, though, because like I said, yeah, the rest of it is like we kind of fall back into it. And this is also nearing the end of his run, because as we have already talked about before, he is ending his run with 25, so we only got 3 more issues left. And I mean, despite things that are going on in the world, and I think no one else is picking up the book that we know of so far. Right.
Hasn't been announced.
Yeah, so we don't know whether, and I know June solicits that out, but like I said, things are kind of still in flux at this point, so whether any of that's gonna roll out. But we'll get to that.
Right.
So
I was about to say things might benefit from being pushed back a month.
We could hope. Yeah, we would hope. So let's get in.
Plans being placed for new
like I said, I do hope somebody's kind of takes the stuff and run with it. What they do with it, who knows? But
5 will get to 10, they'll do another number
yeah,
1, which sucks.
excuse me. Yeah, you're right. I mean, yeah,
Not a
but surprisingly, at least it's gotten this far without having a new number 1. That's actually something. The restraint. But then again, it's all been one story, so then like it wouldn't have done in. I mean, not that they haven't done it before. It would have served no purpose for them to be like, all right, we're just gonna stop it here and put another number 1.
oh, this is the second
Well, no, I
number
know,
1.
but I'm just saying this volume. Yeah,
I
because
got
like
you.
we got 25 issues, and that's not that many books, save like Star Wars books lately, and a couple other books. Yeah, that's even gotten that far. So, um, that said, let's go to pick out a book. Pick a book.
All right. Let's see. What did you read? How about all right. So this was a surprisingly fun read. Amazing
Oh, and
Spider-Man
also
number
slightly a
42.
tearjerker if you let it.
Yes. Yes, very much so. So speaking of what we were just talking about, which was writers who are currently employed at Marvel, really digging deep into the archives for not just story ideas but characters. And what we have here is the appearance of a character who I asked when we spoke about about issue number 41 2 weeks ago. I said, "Who is that? Am I supposed to recognize who that is?" Turns out I sort of was, but probably wasn't expected to recognize who that was. And the main thrust of the story in issue number 42 by Nick Spencer and Ryan Otley is the backstory of one Gog, the monster who appeared at the very end of last issue and who dominates the cover to
And
issue
not
number
good old
42
games
this week.
because I know somebody would be like, God, good old games? No, not that.
Oh no. So we have the story of Gog as explained by Spidey, sort of, to Boomerang of all people, because it's Nick Spencer. So as you mentioned, it's really a shockingly heartbreaking story. It's a story of a monster who began as a
Yeah.
pet, and only as a pet because in a special, in an alternate, not even an alternate, just a different dimension, Gog did not have super size or super strength, was just essentially the size of a small monkey.
Or some would say a puppy.
And well, considering what you see him
I mean,
doing,
yeah,
he's
I
kind
mean,
of a
you're right,
monkey,
but I'm saying, but
right?
yeah, but this, yeah, there were some
I mean,
similarities in.
this guy's not exactly Ross from Friends and his pet monkey from the first season, but yeah, shout out to digging in the archives, ladies and gentlemen. Ross Geller and his monkey.
Oh
no. Marcel. Oh my God!
Wow, how do you even remember all of that?
Breaking it out. Oh my goodness, Marcel the monkey. I think that's what
I
his
think
name
you're
was.
actually right.
That's funny. So, we have the story of a boy and his monkey, and it's actually on the heartbreaking side.
Yeah, the reason why I said dog is because you see how in Gog's early story, like yes, you also see the monkey's part, but you also see is like he's protective of the little boy that he ends up befriending, and even later on in the story, he's like even like some of the memes go like dog protect kind of situations going on here, and you just see Gog's story and how this happens, and then he's with his little boy, and then he gets taken away from the little boy, and then after what happens to him on here on 616 happens with because apparently it goes back to the early days of Spidey and like specifically 106 if I'm not mistaken. There's a link in the show notes. which was his first appearance, and him and Craven the Hunter and that situation. Then he ends up going back to his own place, and then the heartbreaking thing that happens when that happens, and then come to find out how he gets, which brings us back, starts folding back into the story at large, how he gets the tablet or a piece of the tablet that Spidey and Boomerang are searching for, and even how he ends up getting back to Earth essentially, and then we get him back, at the end of the story, back to where he's beating up Spidey and Boomerang, but
Right.
everything before that is just like, oh man, everything is going good, and you could almost see where the shoe's about to drop. It's like, okay, things are going good, and then this thing happens. And then, well, it's starting to get better, and then he makes a new life for himself, and then this happens, and then people start using him, and they even make to the point of saying, well, it's like, well, he's not good or bad. Even Spidey even says so. It's like, he's not good or bad. He's just kind of loyal to a point. And then that's when we start seeing the points go through in his backstory from all of that. And like I said, the heartbreak that happens right before, we get to the stuff dealing with the tablet and stuff. It's like, oh man, that's like, why would you do this? It's almost likens back to those to that Central Park thing when they was doing like the villain side stories issues, and it's like,
Right.
and it's almost like they said, you know what, we gotta make these folk feel something for these folk for these so-called villains. So let's just throw a little wrench in their hearts real quick, and just like, oh man, why you did this to us? But it was a good story. But all of that made for a very good story. It's definitely a
Oh,
potential,
it was
a potential click of the week
yeah,
for me on that front.
it was great because there's a couple of little great, what they discover is that God can
Hmm.
communicate. And uh what's funny, and of course, leave it up to Reed Richards to be able to directly communicate
Of
with
course.
Gog, right? It's like there's a little there's a little thought bubble, good man.
Mm-hmm.
and and it's like, oh, it's Reed. And Reed is literally speaking to Gog through whatever FF Universal Translator
Mm-hmm.
he's got, and they're speaking to each other. And he puts Gog on a trans universal ship that he built just for
Mm-hmm.
Gog. And you would think this would be happily ever after, but no, he's been away for a while, and things have definitely changed on the planet that he is
Yeah.
returning to.
And it all goes to pot.
Yeah, it goes south very, very fast. And as Roddy Cat mentioned, this all relates back to this tablet that is in pieces that Boomerang seems to know where the pieces are, so they're trying to put it back together, and it's all related to this. It's all related to that
Mm-hmm.
story.
Because I think, if I'm not mistaken, if not at the beginning of this issue, then at the end of last issue. No, I think it was at the beginning of this issue. It was like, what is he even doing here, basically?
Right.
And just so happens it's tied to the tablet. So,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, like I said, it's, if you haven't been keeping up with what's going on and Amazing Spidey, catch up. You don't even have to go back that far. Actually, you can go back to like the last couple of issues and then catch up and then read this issue because it's worth it.
It's a lot of
Yeah.
fun. It's a like I said, it's a surprising candidate for click of the week.
Hmm. And with that, we can probably, if you got one more on, or we can go to rapid either way.
No, we can fit one more in, then we'll go
All right,
rapid
sweet.
fire.
What you got?
If you want to go to do X-Men FF, that would be fine.
Okay, boom. We'll do that then. Yeah. X-Men plus X-Men plus Fantastic Four #3, which for some strange reason I thought it was #4 because I was reading 2 last night.
Mm.
and, and not realizing, wait, I've read this already, so why am I reading this again? But it was probably good thing that I did. So yeah, as I say in my notes, we're basically back to shades of the original mini event prior to this, Fantastic Four versus X-Men. In that, someone needs help. No one's fading away this time, but someone, that being Franklin Richards, who apparently, due to a small, well, due to his father's, I don't want to say machinations, that makes it too evil, but due to his father's meddling, does not have access. We find out he doesn't have access to his powers, and his powers we already knew has been fading for like a while now. So that because that's been addressed in Fantasy 4. Kind of find out that might have something to do with something Reed did in most small part. And of course, Doctor Doom, just like he did in the original miniseries, decides to help for his various reasons. One of which, as Valeria says, because he always takes the time to wants to one up their dad. But apparently he has some other things in the pot cooking, and he also has this island, which is strangely enough, coincidentally enough, also close to Krakoa East, or yeah, Krakoa East looks like, and that island is full of mutants who are loyal to Latveria, as the Fantastic Four and X-Men, after they decide not to fight, find out.
Of
You
course.
know, so and actually, Doom being Doom, and wonderfully speaking in the third person, speaking about himself in the third person like he is classically wont to do. He does to a great effect. He even kind of reads Charles Xavier. He was like, "Look, I will acknowledge the X-Men sovereignty, but you didn't earn your power. You got it because you was born with it, and that doesn't mean that doesn't mean you deserve it." Basically, so he was like, don't think just because I will recognize your power that you're greater than me, or greater than us in a sense. But he's talking about him. And of course, the God power theory comes back into play. Shout out to Rock Nicole, but Doom
Right.
co-ops it like he tends to do for his own
What do you call them?
Doom particles. Yeah, basically he even said
Love it.
Von Doom particles. He was like,
Oh,
yeah. So he's like, yeah, oh yeah, I found this thing. I was like, oh yeah, and Reed just was like, yeah, we know because Rock the Cool was doing this, and then Doom corrects him again with his determination of it. But it all comes down to the fact that they're trying to fix. So reluctantly, Reed, along with Beast and Victor, go ahead with this procedure to fix the problem with Franklin and try to get his powers back to full snuff so that he'd be the most powerful again. Meanwhile, Sue, Ben, Johnny, and the rest of the X-Men who had to stay outside kind of go on a sneaking mission and get caught, which gets them into a bigger trouble, a very big thing of trouble with some Sentinel-sized Doombots at the end of the story.
right. It's all a setup too,
Mm-hmm.
because what Roddy Cat mentioned about getting caught is really a setup, because we are led to believe that Doombots are enforcing the will of Doom on Doom Island. And it turns out we and the X-Men and the FF members who were outside, because they get to go outside, not like us. We get no outside, like Lillian Murphy, no
Oh
outside.
Jesus!
Lillian Murphy and Raw. For you kids out there, if you're old enough to be able to listen to that, you'll understand what I mean after you listen.
It's probably on Netflix, so
as
yeah, go for it.
right, as I mentioned, we are duped. We're all duped into thinking that they're Doombots, but they are
Right,
not.
and part of the reason
At least not
Right,
Doombots.
and part of the reason they got duped was because Doom somehow has either some sort of power dampeners or some sort of he basically has some sort of power dampeners that certain mutants like psychics basically are powers is dampened, and he even said, which is actually a callback to FF versus X-Men, and very creepily says that, yeah, Kate, I might know more about your powers, a little bit more about your powers than you do, which also could be construed as a hint to what's going on her, maybe possibly going on with her in the X books. And actually, and one little bit
Right.
tidbit that I totally forgot about from X-Men Plus Fantastic Four number one was that the fact that you might want to ask, like, wait, so this whole started with the X-Men wanting Franklin to come to Krakoa. They tried that they tried to go to the Leanson Street to talk to him. That didn't quite work out because it started off in a fight. Kate and Franklin and Valeria kind of dipped out. Tried to go through a gate, and Franklin couldn't go through the gate, and that's when we found out apparently that Reed might have messed with Franklin enough to have his mutant part of himself dampened, which is also possibly causing his power outage, which leads us to all of this. And yeah, and which leads back to everything we just said about Doom and what he's doing and the setup therein. To what end, we don't necessarily know, but we know it's something more. We know it is what we know it to be, but we also know it's something else. We just don't know what it is yet. And I suppose, I don't know how many more issues there is. There are 1 or 2 issues of this. I suppose if it goes classically, it's going to be 1 more issue.
Good question. Yeah. I mean, I'll check the indicia real quick. I was just going to add that Fantastic Four versus X-Men is in fact on Marvel Unlimited.
Mm-hmm. I remember. Yeah, I remember that one. It was all right. It was like, yeah, it was okay. I want to say because it also kind of tied into, weirdly enough, Mephisto, because I think he showed up in like issue 4 or something, and that which was playing into something else that was going on at the time. If Mephisto shows up in this, I'm gonna be upset. That's all I'm gonna say about that.
He's everywhere.
I mean,
right
pretty
now.
much.
Yeah, it doesn't say, right. It doesn't say in the indicia how many issues the series is.
Probably have to go to like Comixology or something.
Right.
But yeah, it can't be more than 4 to 5, and the way it's going, it could very well end next issue.
I'll just check Diamond real quick because I know that this is the last week they'll have comic book information,
which we will give.
Yeah, that's a teaser for
Yeah,
the new section, ladies and gentlemen.
So, but yeah.
All right, you want me to?
Yeah,
rapid fire.
Let's
if
do
we're done.
it.
All right.
Looks like 4 according to Comixology.
Okay.
So, which that makes sense. All right. I guess I'll go ahead and handle mine because you got a few more than I do. So, let's see. First off, Falcon and Winter Soldier #2, which I believe you've read.
I did. Go ahead.
This was actually a fun issue. So outside of the fact that they got handled by a little kid last issue, they're off to apparently they got a lead on a Hydra, dare say, uprising, and apparently and supposed power struggle, given that Zemo was supposedly dead. Well, we found out in this issue he is not. He is limbless. He has lost a limb, but he's apparently very much alive and has a rival who has sent the kid that took down Falcon and Winter Soldier last issue. And in this issue, apparently now, Falcon and Winter Soldier have to go along with a deal with Zemo because their interests are slightly aligned. And as Zemo says, like, well, you're gonna go after me now and then have somebody worse than me take over Hydra, or you can go after that person, go after that person, and then come back later to at some later date to try to take down one of my plans, like lesser two evils type situation. And of course, there is the beginning of the issue where they have the Heroes Don't Kill, an abbreviated version of Heroes Don't Kill, by Falcon to Winter Soldier. So we'll see where all of that kind of breaks out. But other than that, the fun in this issue comes from the big ass fight within a couple of different pages where they're fighting a whole bunch of Hydra agents on a train, or excuse me, wannabe Hydra agents, Hydra assassins on a train. And each train's got basically a different type of thing going on with it until they get to who they find out to be Zemo, who is very much alive after supposedly being shot by the Punisher. You got something you wanna?
Yeah. So that's so you're done, right? Oh no.
No. I was asking if you had anything more on that one. Okay.
Oh no.
Cool. Star Wars Bounty Hunter #2. Basically, hey, there's one bounty hunter who's a cyborg, and he's he basically finds his way to another clue to the bounty he's looking for, and that bounty might be possibly going through one Boba Fett, and the people that are following follow that up, and there are some of the other bounty hunters who will more than likely headlong run into everyone at whatever case is getting their own clues as the person they're looking for, because apparently they have a score to settle and they are hot and heavy trying to get to this person. And that, folks, is it for me.
All right. I've got a few more as we sometimes tend to do. We reverse roles. Um, and this week it seems like I'm the one that had a chance to read a lot more than Roddy Cat. So bear with me as I make my way through as Roddy Cat is showing off his juice box. Uh, So I'll start off with Giant Size X-Men Nightcrawler #1. So the first thing I will mention about this book in rapid fire is that it is written by Jonathan Hickman and art by the great Alan Davis. Alan Davis is old. I have met Alan Davis very recently within the last 2 years, and he is not a young whippersnapper. He is not, but he is churning out some great stuff here. I think he owes a lot to Carlos Lopez, the color artist on this, but Alan Davis seems to be in fine form, at least in his draftsmanship and creating characters that look like his style. He is definitely not going backwards in any way. The crux of the story is that the X-Men run into oh sorry uh the X-Men discover that something is amiss at the Krakoa Gateway at the old X-Mansion, and a team is dispatched to take a look, and not ironically, iBoy is sent as well to take a look. Ha ha. There's a couple of jokes at the front of this issue directed towards that. um, there's a bit of haunted mansion type of story here, this being in the X Mansion. So that's sort of the idea behind it. But we find out that um, uh, an old X-Men villain is sort of behind this, and an old X-Men mutant villain is also involved in this. And finally, there is a nice little reveal that involves uh, Doug Ramsey in this issue, and it's really a lot of fun. So this is you could definitely tell that Hickman is using this issue to um, weave a couple of outstanding plot points back into the greater X-Men story that he's telling. And I think it's actually something that I forgot to add to my personal physical pull list. I'm going to have to track this issue down when the stores reopen. Next up for me is Hellions #1. So this is actually, believe it or not, a surprise potential click of the week for me. And I know that of our co-host Tim DOGG98 is also a fan of this issue and how surprising it was. And I think we were just basically impressed at how it was executed and I'm especially surprised by how well it was executed. I did not pull this issue, and I think I'm gonna definitely track this down as soon as the stores open back up. So this is by Zeb. It's written by Zeb Wells and art by Steven Segovia, and it's all very well put together. It's really about um, the miscreants of mutantdom, led by Mr. Sinister. And at the beginning of the issue, we also find that Havoc may not be operating on all cylinders, and that's what gets him put into this team, as well as Psylocke, aka Quanon, not to be confused with Elizabeth Braddock, who is now the new Captain Britain. So, if that does not confuse you, then good. You've been keeping up with what's been going on in Hoxpox and Dawn of X. Um, But as I mentioned earlier, these are a group of miscreants. So I believe everyone had the same reaction I did when we were doing um, news announcements and stories that came uh, out of solicitations. This was a surprisingly good read for all of the crazy character combinations we get. So that definitely is, give kudos to Zeb Wells and Steven Segovia for putting together an issue that read really well and actually had a seeming point to it. It wasn't pointless, and it actually ends on a great cliffhanger page. So fans of 80s, late 80s X-Men comics will appreciate where this book ends. Next up is Immortal Hulk number 33. This is definitely a potential click of the week. We get some more Zemnu action from Al Ewing and I'm tripping on the artist because I think there's multiple artists on this book this week. It's not just Joe Bennett, but there are multiple artists because you can definitely tell by the various um, mindscapes that we explore that different artists were tasked with doing these particular pages so that things would look vastly different as we mentioned in Empire, so we could definitely differentiate between what is happening in the here and now and what is happening either elsewhere or else when. Um, this issue, we had Joe Bennett on the main story and Rui Jose, Ballardino Bravo, Mark Deering, and Mark Morales as the inkers on the main story. And Nick Pitara, the artist, on the Mindscape sequences. So yeah, it's really interesting stuff. There is a lot revealed in this issue. I'm not going to get into all of it. It's definitely well worth the read. I know Roddy Cat is keeping up with this. He will get to this shortly. And I do not want to spoil anything that happens in this because there are lots of really cool things. There's a comeuppance that I was glad to see happen in this issue. So there's that. So it's really a lot of fun. I cannot recommend this enough. I don't know if this is the book that Tim Dog 98 has not yet started or has not read at all. I definitely recommend that he do this from jump. You got to start at number 1. This is not something you want to pick up halfway through. So there is my recommendation for at least a potential click of the week. Next up is Killadelphia number 5. This is an Image book. For fans of the show that know that I've been reading this, this is by the stories by Rodney Barnes with art by Jason Shawn Alexander and colors by Luis NCT. This is the story of vampires basically being in hiding in Philadelphia since the days of President John Adams, and basically the story stems from there. It really does have a lot to say about the history of classism and racism in America, as well as just being a good old fashioned horror / vampire story. And it's very much racing to, I guess, what would seem to be not a conclusion, but definitely the high point of the story, the big climax confrontation. So for anyone who is looking for something different to read, I would recommend Killadelphia, but definitely start with issue number 1. Wolverine number 2 is kind of a letdown. I have to say that I was expecting very big things from Ben Percy on this book, writing this book. Adam Kubert is doing a fantastic job of art on this, but I think that this particular issue is a little bit out there, but I think this will read a lot better in a collected form. This is just the second issue of the opening story arc, so this is moving things along at a very incremental pace. So Um, that's pretty much the source of my disappointment. So I will wait to read this full arc in full before I render any sort of judgment of as to whether or not I'm going to keep reading the book moving forward. Last for me this week is X-Men #9. This is definitely a potential click of the week for me. Roddy Cat said he is behind, so I am not going to spoil this issue. But oh, is it so much fun with all of these characters in space? We've got Starjammers, we've got Imperial Guard, we've got a group of X-Men flying on the run from Brood, and we've got um, a Kree accuser giving us a history lesson as to why this is even happening. So this was just a ton of fun. You could tell that Hickman was having just a ball writing a spacefaring X-Men story. And let me tell you, the way this book ends took me by surprise. I don't know if it would take a lot of people by surprise, because if you've been reading along, it's sort of one of those things that you can sort of see coming when it happens. You're like, wait a second. Of course, I should have seen that happen. Seen that as a possibility, a strong possibility of happening. I didn't. I was just having fun reading it, and when it happened, I was like, "Oh, well, would you look at that?" So ultimately, it was just a lot of fun in the telling and in the reading. So this is definitely a potential click of the week for me, and that's it for me.
Cool. Before we go to clicks of the week, I just realized I had one more book. And I get to that real quick because I actually read it really fairly quick. Oh, I actually kind of brushed through it really quick. Transformers versus the Terminator #1. So y'all know me. I'm probably stupid for these dumb. There you go. These dumb crossovers, especially where they're either Transformers and or Power Rangers fair or DC stuff. I don't know. It's dumb crossover stuff. Anyway, so the crux of this is real quick. Hey, guess what? You know what the Terminator is. You know what the Transformers are. You know what time frame both of those happen to take place in. And it just so happens that all of that ends up colliding in this book because it seems that in the beginning of the book that the Decepticons and or the Cybertronians at large, whoever, are trying to take down Skynet for some odd reason. It just so happens that the T-800 escapes back to in time because that's specifically the one that they're looking for. Uh, yeah, it escapes back in time to guess what date? Well, guess what day? 1984. Guess who he runs into? Sarah Connor. Guess what he doesn't do to Sarah Connor? Kill her. Guess what he ends up doing? Is basically teaming up with her, sort of. In a truck that looks like Optimus Prime, and it just so happens that that truck ends up going to a certain place in the Transformers 1984 lore that if you are an astute fan of, you can kind of see where this is going. And they end up there. So they end up there, and a certain thing happens to said truck, and it just so happens to be right before an event happens in the beginning of the Transformers' life on Earth. And he gets in there and he finds a bit of a not so bit of a surprise. So this, I'm gonna go back and read this, but this was like I said, these crossover books, including like the Star Trek ones or whatnot, are like they're kind of silly, or they can tend to be silly. This one is sort of kind of rooted in both of the source materials, and they do it to a fairly decent, degree. Like, granted, you would say that, well, you know what the Terminator is there for, and if he's running to a certain person, then, right off the bat, that in itself is a problem. But if you are a fan, you should check it out, because it's kind of interesting to from what I fleshed out from it. That being the case, that is it. So we will get to the clicks of the week.
All right, clicks of the week.
Yeah, I'll definitely be going back and reading a couple of joints, including the aforementioned Hellions and X-Men. Because I think, wait, wasn't that speaking of X-Men stuff, wasn't that like they talked about that mission? Is that the same mission they were talking about going on in 7? before the other stuff happened? Okay,
Possibly.
because basically,
I mean, it's only going on to
right? I know, yeah, but I'm in 7 because I'm saying this because I just read it. Scott and Wolverine was like, "Hey, we're gonna go on this trip out to that moon of in share space." Yeah,
Right.
and there was even a slight joke about the swimsuit edition.
No.
That I happened to catch in the issue, but that's a whole other thing. And I don't know, like I said, I hadn't read 8 yet, so it may be out now the same thing. Anyway, we have a couple of clicks of the week from our cohorts who are not here, and they are from Dirt, the Flash number is 752. He didn't necessarily give a reason as to why, but he basically said that's it. And from Tim, Hellions number 1, which, like I said earlier, kind of was like no surprise for me from him. And I hadn't even read it yet, but
I mean, it was surprisingly good. It's actually a surprising strong candidate for click of the week for me as well.
I think for myself, I'm just going to go ahead and go for Amazing Spider-Man 42.
Oh,
It
so
really
good
was.
this week.
And it's the meaning of life. So there you go.
It was so good. I mean, that's one of mine. Man, you know, Hellions is a potential click of the week for me. Immortal Hulk is a potential click of the week for me.
X-Men, Fantastic Four.
Yeah, X-Men 9. Yeah, X-Men Fantastic Four as well. Not as strong as some of the other ones, but definitely a potential click of the week. Honestly, I think I'm gonna go with Immortal Hulk number 33 because of the comeuppance that's in it, but everything else is so strong this week. You know, X-Men number 9, like I said, when you get to that last, you know, when you get to the ending, you're just like, oh, okay, that was really good. You know, as well, you know, I can't ignore what Spencer and Otley did in Amazing Spider-Man 42 and telling the great story of Gog. And as you mentioned, it's just like those Craven's Last Hunt. What was it? What was the title of the story?
Was it Last Stand, or was it? I can't remember actually. It was like last.
Yeah,
because Last Hunt was the original one.
Exactly.
So it must be like Last Stand or something like that. I can't remember.
Last Stand.
Probably wrong about that.
Yeah, obviously, yeah. Last Hunt was obviously the original Mike Zeck and J.M. DeMatteis. I think it was Craven's Hunt. I don't know what the hell was it called.
Let's see.
Yeah, now we're busy looking it up.
Fact checking kills podcasts. That's what they tell people.
You know? Seriously, because now you know what it is. We're the type of people who are just like, wait a second, we read so much, we forget a lot of this stuff. But now we're unhappy
Not only
about
that,
having
but
forgotten it.
despite the fact that we don't get that many emails, we know somebody will be like, "Hey, this is what it is, you crazy folk."
Right.
Oh man, there's some interesting covers coming up. Hunted.
Hunted.
Yep.
Is that what it is? Yeah, that's right. Hunted is a 2019 comic book storyline. That's it. It's a spiritual successor to the 1987 storyline Craven's Last Hunt. All right, Hunted. Okay. Right. So thankfully we didn't kill too much airtime with that. So we'll move on with our first ad read of the night. Just to tell you what my first ad read was, so I'm stalling and telling you that it is Funko. I don't even know if we have a chance to display these. So
Hold on, before you do that, real quick,
and
let me do something. Okay. Shoot.
You know, as we figure out our new status quo here, doing things. That's it.
Meanwhile, at the Hall of Justice.
Funko.
That. And then...
And just to give you the heads up, I'm going to finish up with Amazon because you know
course.
that's how we do.
Think. Uh-oh, shit. And that. Go for it.
All right. So, our first ad read of the night is for Funko Fun at First Sight, your home for exclusive collectibles such as their world famous pop vinyl bobbleheads, apparel including t-shirts, hats, and socks, and brand merchandise such as custom DIY pop figures, art books, and skateboards. And now the listeners of the Comic Book Chronicles can enjoy 10% off your entire purchase when shopping at Funko. To place your first order with 10% off and to help keep our show free for you, go to our network website at cspn.us. That's cspn.us. Then click on the Keep Our Podcast Free link at the top of the page. From there, scroll down to the Funko link and place your order. When you get to the checkout, put in the offer code SHOP10, SHOP10, for your 10% off discount. Funko through cspn.us. Do it today. Now it's time for the news on what would be MLB opening day. Let's go Mets when we finally get back into baseball.
Yay! And we start off as we do every week with the scientific news, with the cinematic news. No science news this week. That'll be another thing I got. Somewhere else. Anyway, the ultimate way. So normally this piece of news would have been in the clickbait section, but I figure since people are home quarantined, you might be thinking of something you might want to do, and here's a suggestion: the ultimate way to watch the Marvel movies. You get one of these. You've gotten one of these lists probably every year for the last 10 years. Well, here's another one, and here's pretty much it for right now because we ain't gonna get any more movies until things iron out. So 23 movies, and here's the chronological order that you may or may not be craving. Go for it. Next.
All right. In some unconfirmed news, has it been
Yes.
confirmed yet?
I believe it has. Yes.
It has been confirmed. So it is no longer unconfirmed. It is confirmed that the Mandalorian has cast its Ahsoka Tano in adult form, and they have picked Rosario Dawson to play Ahsoka Tano, and the nerd boys are
Ain't mad at
gleeful.
it.
Seriously, talk about someone who has acting chops and genre cred to put into this role.
Yeah, and weirdly enough, because it came shortly after. I think we even talked about it. That she was down to. I think a fan was out there on Twitter was like, "Hey, Rosario Dawson for Ahsoka," and she was like, "I'm down," basically.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Although, if I'm not mistaken, she already knew, and she's spilling the beans.
right. Yeah, that is also a possibility. And actually, I'm going to add to this real quick, a little addendum to it, because Star Wars' Ahsoka Tano actress Ashley Eckstein reacts to Rosario Dawson joining the Mandalorian, who you know Ashley Eckstein as the voice of Ahsoka Tano in the various iterations of animated Star Wars series of recent, such as the Clone Wars, such as Rebels, and she basically says that the truth is I am not involved in The Mandalorian. I can't answer questions for something I'm not a part of. I am an actress, and I have performed in all types of medium, live action, film, television, theater, voice, hosting, and it's been my dream for 14 years to continue to play Ahsoka Tano in all forms. So, and then people kind of have taken that little end piece to denote something, but that's a very
Yeah, I mean, she would have liked to. I mean, at the end of the day, we can't deny that she pretty much would have liked to continue
Right.
playing
Yeah.
Ahsoka.
You
So,
know, because she.
I mean, not just continue, but to bring her to the live screen, to
Right.
the film screen.
So, there were decisions made that, and this was a very diplomatic answer to that. So, simple as
Yep.
that. Moving right along. Disney Plus is polling users. It's actually something else that's also kind of maybe rumor bait or something. But according to this article, Disney Plus is polling users about adding Whedonverse series to the service. And even the first article, which rightly says Disney Plus subscribers claim they are being asked if fan favorite Whedonverse shows like Buffy the Vampire Slayer should be available on all platform on the platform. Now we know that Fox has been swallowed up in the Disney merger, so and therefore Josh Whedon's show would be under that. We also know Agents of Shield, which is the ABC / Disney show anyway, is already on there apparently. Um, so there's that. Cut to apparently somebody on Twitter was like, putting this out there that Disney Plus is contemplating putting Firefly and stuff out there. And the article also says that, this person says that it was an email that they received. Now, I'm a Disney Plus subscriber, and I believe Agent 70 also is. I have
Yes,
not received one email about that. Have you?
nay, I
So
have
now
not.
that could very well say. Now this was dated March 25th, and I even looked back specifically to see and looked through my trash
Not yet.
to see if anything like that has come about. No. So it is quite possible that this could be not true. It is also could be the fact that if they did something like that, it went out to selective people. Although I doubt that they would do that to selective people like that. So all I'm saying is take this with a grain of salt, and I don't even know how it matters to the greater folk. Because I mean, let's face it, the majority of Disney stuff that's on Disney, I mean, the stuff that's on Disney Plus is a majority family friendly because of because of the main series. So there's some stuff obviously with there's some other stuff out there that's not necessarily, but and those shows, I mean, it's Fox stuff, and it's not like those shows could not fit on that service. But I don't know. I don't think this particular thing is legit, personally. So, like I said, if you see that floating around there, which is why I put this out, which is why I'm saying this, is like if you see that floating around there, or if you even get that email, you can let us know. But I don't see how this is real. Yeah.
Okay.
Next.
All right. After 6 weeks in theaters, the underappreciated Birds of Prey and the Fantabulous Emancipation
well
of One
done.
Harley Quinn movie.
I said, well done.
What's that? Oh, all right. Are coming out on video on demand. That means that everybody who didn't see it in theaters, and that's a lot of us, can enjoy the adventures of Harley and company right from your own couch.
Which, yeah, I'm very still curious about watching this movie. I've heard fairly decent good things, and I've also heard other things on it. So we'll see. It'll probably eventually it's gonna happen one way or the other because we got end of year stuff for next year to do. Anywho, Jeff Johns pens an open and personal letter to read before you watch Stargirl. So, the DC TV series Stargirl is scheduled to debut on May 11th on Disney Universe and follow soon after on CW. But Warner Brothers, who produces the show, has sent out advance copies of the first 3 episodes to press for review. We didn't get a copy. Where's our copy? Anyway, as well as a personal letter from the show's creator, showrunner Jeff Johns, because Jeff Johns has a personal attachment to Stargirl, because not only was it his first comic series for DC, it is also based on his late sister Courtney, who was killed in an airplane disaster. Now, some would listen to that and say, oh, well, he just wants it to work out because he's trying to put people's heartstrings so it won't get canceled or something, But at the same time, come on, people, don't have to be that heartless. Let's whatever. And I think attached to this article, which I will not read, is his letter to folks. So yeah, so stay tuned for to social media for when the embargoes hits about how the show is, or wait and watch it yourself, which is probably what I'll end up doing because we don't have one. We don't have copies. Next up,
All right. All right. Justice League Mortal. New photos of the team and costume surface. Okay. Filmmaker Ryan
I
UniCOMB,
know,
that's a
right?
real name, has released. I'm sorry, dude. I am so sorry. I am the last person to make fun of anyone's last name. But seriously, UniCOMB um, has released photos from the abandoned Justice League Immortal from director George Miller that see the famed heroes and costume, giving fans a better idea at what the team would have looked like in the
And if you're
movie.
watching the video,
Okay.
you can see said they look like figures in this Instagram image. And, like somebody made like bootleg figures of the four main characters, that being Superman, Batman, Flash, and Aquaman. And the only other thing I have to say about this is just like UniCOMB. Oh.
Oh no! Robotic
Yeah, I know you
thinking
gotta work that
phone.
one out.
You know?
Anywho, next up, Russell T Davies will release new Doctor Who material. I'm glad you see. This is why I love Age of 7 because he can appreciate that kind of stuff. Anyway, Russell T Davies will release
Oh,
new Doctor Who material for the 15th anniversary Rose rewatch.
it's the non-remix, the original
Say what?
version, folks. I said it's the original. It's the original version, not the remix. That's where that line comes from.
Oh, right. By the way, yeah, R.I.P. Craig Mike, who passed away. Wait, did he? I think he passed away on March 12th. And I didn't see any. I believe so.
Right.
No, well, yeah, Biggie was March 9th, but I believe March 12th was when he passed. And I didn't see anything on social media about that, which is kind of a bummer. But anyway,
Yeah.
um, so yeah, Russell T Davies is going to do some new stuff for the 15th anniversary of Rose, which was a Doctor Who episode back in the days of Destro's run, with AKA the Ninth Doctor. And I say Destro because it was, Christopher Eccleston who played Destro, who was the Ninth Doctor. And I believe that was like the second episode or something. I don't remember. But basically, they're doing stuff for it, and there you go. I know people love that version, but I don't know too many people who actually do. I've seen it. That's like Rose Tyler. I'm not Rose. Rose is one thing. Christopher Eccleston as the Doctor. Whatever. Next up, I believe actually that is it for the cinematic stuff, if I'm not mistaken. Yep, it sure is. So I'm going.
Yep.
So
So we'll just transition over.
So we're gonna we're gonna go over to the comic book news, but first I'm just gonna kind of say, hey, check out the clickbait section because there's some stuff in there, including the introduction to the New Warriors, which came out of Outlawed #1, which I still haven't read yet, and also I know Agent 70 is probably up on this, but I am not. Sam Witwer on the Clone Wars game-changing finale and saying goodbye to George Lucas's Star Wars.
Why are you not
Because
up
I'm
on
still doing a
this?
rewatch. I am in the middle of season 2. I
Oh,
just got to the Mandalore stuff, and the Darksaber showed up.
Roddy Cat just taking his sweet time
I mean,
rewatching
what
the
else do I
Clone
have to do
Wars.
right
Oh,
now?
that's true. That is true.
So, which
I mean, I'm enjoying the episodes that
mhm,
come out, so it's definitely a
yeah.
lot of fun.
And with that, we hit on to the comic book news, starting off with Marvel Comics' Black Widow relaunch takes Natasha away from the Red Room and into retirement. So yeah, once again, until the Black Widow's depth we go, and that sounds kind of dirty, but it's not meant to be. Thanks to her central role in Marvel Cinematic Universe, Black Widow has risen to become one of Marvel's most recognizable superheroes. That's actually true. And now, as her film prepares for an eventual release, postponed from its planned May 1st launch due to coronavirus, aka COVID-19, Marvel Comics is also prepping a new volume of her solo title from writer Kelly Thompson with artists Elena Casagrande and Jordie Bellaire. So that book's going to be colored quite nicely. Um, So yeah, so they've had a couple of Black Widow miniseries in the last year or so. So kind of not surprised about this, but yeah, they had to do something. Like I'm not sure why they were kept on starting and stopping stuff when they could have just either waited or just made it ongoing that would run into the movie. But who knows? Anyway, next up.
Are the X-Men joining Empire's Kree-Skrull alliance against Earth's heroes? Marvel's released a new Empire teaser by David Nakayama showing Cyclops holding a Krakoan blossom alongside several X-Men and some Kree and Skrull soldiers. The teaser bears the caption, "Enemies must become allies," potentially implying that the mutants of Krakoa will wind up as the Kree-Skrull alliance's allies on Earth. We already know the X-Men will face off with a horde of mutant zombies in their own Empire X-Men limited series. Could this add a new wrinkle to that story? Very interesting.
And basically, kind of what you said, I haven't read it yet, but basically what you said in what was going on in 9, I kind of wonder that kind of plays into it from X-Men 9. So, but I guess we'll find out. Next up, Remender blames Inhumans mandate for his X-Men near miss, shares what could have been. So, Uncanny X-Force writer Rick Remender says that he was once scheduled to take over the core X-Men title, but changed his plans at the last minute, pivoting almost entirely to creator-owned work and leaving Marvel Comics behind. Now 6 years on, Remender has unveiled his pitch for the series on Twitter, as well as offering an explanation for his departure. And he says, just found my entire 2-year X-Bible, coincidentally. That's me saying that part. From when I was going to take over the X-Books, Remender said on Twitter, haven't opened it since I quit in 2014. Was very Phantom X, Jean, and Professor Zorn centric. Big Bad was Mastermind. What? Just couldn't make myself do the mandated Inhuman story, c'est la vie. And to me, I say I might be glad that we didn't get that, because I'm not a big fan of Phantom X, and that whole Phantom X Jean and Zorn thing was, I wasn't crazy about that. So
I mean, they really tried to push Phantom X onto everyone for the longest time, and it just wasn't that interesting.
And he's back, but that's in a limited capacity, but it is what it is. Next up.
Right. Alrighty, Spidey will get his science on in WEB of SpiderMan #1 this June. Get ready for Peter Parker to make a return to his scientific roots. WEB of Spider-Man #1, written by Kevin Shinick, with art by Roberto DeSalvo and a cover by Gurihuru, is the first of a 5-issue miniseries based on the new Spider-Man attraction coming to Avengers Campus. Okay.
So it sounds like it's going back to teenage Peter and maybe possibly, I don't know. Based on what it says down here, it sounds like there's some animated younger Spidey first kind of situation going on here. At least that's what I'm picking.
That's fine.
Yeah, it is what it is. Just because you didn't know how to do it, Marvel tells you how to read comics the Marvel way. So I saw this on Twitter, and I think that came out. Wait, did that come out this week? Nope, April 15th. I think we may actually have a copy of it in our thing. But longtime comic fans tend to forget one important fact when trying to introduce newbies to the wonderful world of sequential storytelling. They can be a tiny bit tricky to decode at first. On April 15th, Christopher Hastings and Scott Koblish will present a comic in comical yet educational fashion for fans of all experience levels in how to read comics the Marvel way. Not to be confused with how to draw comics the Marvel way, which is the classic book on how to draw. I'm actually slightly kind of surprised they haven't done this by now, but at the same time, I don't know. Like, what is this going to be? But anyway, so how to read comics the Marvel way breaks down that language in a way, or it's comic storytelling is a language that we habitual comic readers take for granted. And then this book will break down that language in a way that invites in younger or new readers. So this is basically something for newer folk that's trying to get into, who may possibly want to get into comics. So that's not a bad thing. But when I first saw this, it was like, oh, wait, are you saying we're that dumb?
Mm. Oh
Now, we've been reading
no.
comics all our life. How dare you? No, but it was just kind of funny when I saw this. So we'll check it out. We'll let you know what if we get to read this when that time comes. Next up,
All right, next up, a leaked Star Wars game screenshot. The screenshot's allegedly from Star Wars 1313, game which was shelved in 2013, has surfaced online, giving us a look at the cavernous underworld of Coruscant's level 1313, complete with the protagonist who looks a lot like a celebrity bounty hunter you're probably familiar with. Take a look at the full screen version on the website. Celebrity bounty hunter?
Boba Fett.
Oh, okay, good. Good. Because God help you if it was Dog the Bounty Hunter.
No, I don't think. Oh God, please, please don't let them put Dog the Bounty Hunter in Star Wars universe. Don't do that.
Just saying. I think I can only imagine the protest I would raise at this point.
You wouldn't be the only one.
So glad to hear that.
Yes.
That's fun. That's pretty fun.
Star Wars 1313 got shelved, and actually, Bubba showed up in that Star Wars Bounty Hunter book that I mentioned earlier. So yeah, it's just he's all the rage these days. That kid. Scotty Young to donate story proceeds to Hero Initiative. So comic book writer and artist Scotty Young is putting his money where his mouth is during the worldwide fight against coronavirus and COVID. What do you mean and COVID-19? That's what it is. Anyway, I know that's just a sentencing thing. Anyway, Young is donating 20% of all sales at ScottyYoung.com to Hero Initiative, the charity that helps comic book creators in medical and financial need. And he goes on to say, comics are my whole life. I spent my childhood reading them and my entire adult life making them, Young said. We're taking the needed steps to keep our country safe to slow the spreading of COVID-19. But in doing that, so many aspects of our lives are going to be affected in huge ways. Our comic community included. With conventions being canceled, books being postponed, publishers pushing pause on production, and launches, retailers on the front lines figure out how to keep their doors open. We have to find ways to help each other. So there will be no great time in my memory where Hero Initiative will be needed. So good on him. He said it says here that his donation kicks off immediately as of this article, which was a couple of days ago as it was recorded, and will run through April 30th, 2020. Please, for the love of God, Newsarama, get an editor.
Oh no.
I say that I'm looking for a job. Anyway, next up.
All right. Dark Horse announces new God of War comic series. So they've announced the next installment in the God of War saga, God of War, Fallen God by Chris Robertson and Tony Parker.
Yeah, so when you get that PS4, this will be one of the games you can get, and then you can read the comic book that goes along with it. Crickets.
You know, right? Like, okay. I mean, I didn't even want to play the crickets. I felt bad.
No, I mean, look, that was from I haven't played it yet, but I hear that God of War game is actually pretty good. There's even because it goes Norse mythology, which kind of hints at some stuff that would be aligned in your interest comic book wise. Let's just say with a certain hero.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, Lady Baltimore, Hellboy's Mike oh Lord, what am I doing? Hellboy's Mike Mignola co-writing new Dark Horse miniseries. I blame the water, not the apple juice. Mike Mignola and Christopher Golden have teamed with Bridget Connell for Lady Baltimore, a new Baltimore spin-off series from Dark Horse Comics. Not to be confused with Charlie Baltimore from Long Kiss Goodnight. And the book that it was based off of, whatever.
That's fun.
So yeah, apparently. So what?
I was about to say, Didn't a lady rapper take
Yes.
that
Yep.
moniker as
Charlie
well?
Baltimore. Sure did. Whatever
Okay.
happened to her, who
Well,
even knows?
all right, so that I will throw the
Exactly.
crickets out for.
And throughout the next story, if you don't mind.
All right, Power Rangers TMNT's Turtle Megazord. God, Turtle Megazord is a mecha in a half shell. Great. So, Boom Studios, Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, crossover teams, the teenagers with attitude with the heroes in a half shell, along with introducing the Turtle Rangers and Ninja Rangers. Fans now can look forward to the debut of the Turtle Megazord in the crossover's 5th issue. Designed by cover artist Dan Mora, the Turtle Megazord is the physical size of the typical Megazord found in Mighty Morphin Power Rangers with the look of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. The head is shaped like a turtle with the front and back sporting the signature turtle shell.
Yeah,
Cowabunga.
and part of the shell is part of the T-Rex from the original Rangers, and the legs are the original Rangers legs. So yeah, I still need to read this doggone thing. I haven't read it yet. Because it feels like it might be a
Mm,
lot of fun. Hopefully it will be. Next up, some sad news, and I'll probably take these next two actually. Yeah.
yeah, and we'll discuss it. Go ahead.
Diamond halts shipments of all new comics due to coronavirus pandemic. So Diamond Comic Distributors is indefinitely suspending the receipt of new comic books due to coronavirus, as I just said. And going on, so we already talked about all the stuff that's been canceled surrounding this, like Free Comic Book Day and all that kind of good, all not good stuff, but all this con and stuff like that. So here's the official word from Diamond about what they're doing. In addition to Diamond, Steve Geppi officially announces and explains the pause in distribution of said comic books. So following the report that Diamond halted products from printers, the Diamond's founder Steve Geppi has issued an official statement confirming and explaining the decision and outlining the current time frame for its change in operations. And that full statement is in this article, which I will not read the full thing of. But basically, yeah, comics are going to stop shipping starting actually this week, right? Next week. Yeah.
Yeah, next week. Next week. So they're basically stopped now, so that anything that with a street date of April 1st, so
hmm
basically next week's books, isn't going to come out from this week forward until the situation with
Right.
COVID-19 changes.
And a lot of stores, well, in certain places like for instance, where PC underscore dirt is, there is a quarantine in effect, and
Right.
non-essential shops.
Right. Illinois,
Right, exactly.
New York.
Where
Yeah.
7 years and a couple of other places, people can't go anywhere in non-essential businesses. That should include GameStop, even though for some stupid reason they're calling themselves an essential business, stupidly.
Hey, if I need to get my
I
PS4
mean,
at a
then you
whim,
can get it
you
from
know.
Amazon. But
I
nevertheless, this
know.
and
But
and
go on.
GameStop is still
Go
closing
on.
stores, so that's a whole nother side thing that's going on. But that's that. So yeah, due to all this, Diamond is halting new shipments, which means we're not going to get new comics. They're trying to figure out things to do, such as digital distribution. As a matter of fact, I should have put this. I probably should have put that the next one. Matter of fact, we'll skip the next one and tag this one in the midst of it, so we can go ahead and talk about this also. Leading comics retailer explains Diamond News warns against digital only switch, because yeah, one of the things they're contemplating is going digital with such places like Comixology for distribution of books, which is still, as far as we know, is not going to be affected for the time being. We know physicals definitely is, but digital could potentially get mixed into that, but it doesn't seem like that may or may not be a way to go. Obviously, retailers, physical book retailers, are trying to keep their doors open, and even in places where there are, quarantine and they can't open their stores, they got to try to figure out business. So this whole digital strategy thing will put a further dent in their pockets. And comic book stores are already kind of having a time, even when they are open, trying to keep the doors open, and depending on who you talk to anyway. Um,
Right.
that being said, and there's also, just to get this out of the way real quick, and then you take the floor. People are talking about, well, no more comics. That means comics are doomed, right? And I hate when people do that stuff because they're being stupid. Like, no, this is not the end of comics. Even comic creators have gone out there and be like, no, this is not the end of comics. Have been here. Comics have gone through much worse than this. Especially with the comic book code stuff, and but and has still survived. This is a temporary situation that will hopefully work itself out. It's just gonna take some time and try to figure out what to do about the situation. But all the people are like, "Oh, comics is over," blah 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 blah. Just shut up.
I
Yeah,
honestly
neither
don't
do I.
understand that. That's sort of, I think the appropriate conversation is not that comic books are going the way of the dodo, but unfortunately we're going to see a lot of comic book stores that operate on the
Mm-hmm.
slimmest of margins possibly go under, and
Mm-hmm.
that's disturbing because the fewer places you can get your physical comics, the fewer ways that you're able to enjoy this hobby. um it's just, that it's unfortunate. The hope is that, um with whatever support system that's put in place for small businesses, hopefully comic book stores can
Hopefully.
take advantage of that, and and find a way to reopen and get the books that are outstanding or sitting at UPS, or need to be shipped from Diamond. Hopefully, we can all get our stuff so that the completest collectors among us, myself included, won't be suffering from too many hits to our
Withdrawal. Yeah.
OCD. No. When I say hits to our OCD, I mean like
Ah,
having holes in our collections, because that drives me
sure.
up the wall. When I notice that I've missed that there's something missing in my collection that I thought I had gotten, and then I realize that it's not there. It's the whole point of keeping
Sure.
track of your collection. So it's just a pain. I definitely am in that camp. Um, but yeah, I think it's overstated. The
Mm-hmm.
creators are still out there. The hunger for the stories is still out there. It's just a matter of how they're distributed to us. I'm still not that big a fan of digital comics. As much as I love reading stuff on Marvel Unlimited, it only serves to remind me that my physical comics that are on file in my drawer boxes still need to be looked at
Mm.
every once in a
On the
while.
other
So
side of that, that would be me because I am, like, granted, up until fairly recently, where I couldn't go to the comic book store anyway. I was mostly digital, with the exception of probably a good handful of books. So I do appreciate the physical aspect of books. Don't get me wrong, but like for me, it was just like, digital so much is, and I don't have a whole lot of space, and you know, yada yada,
right,
back to back. Both sides of the story as it is, but I still supported my local comic book shop because, like I said, I still had a handful of books that I would get physically because I wanted them physical. So I still respect that part of it. Um, that said, coming out of this, with everything else that's going to change, and hopefully there is still going to be a good many stores that will serve the market. I would assume there's going to be some change as to how things are going to be distributed. I would like to think, because obviously, you know, some people are saying, well, the change to direct market probably was a mistake. Um, and I can't sit here and say that I'm like that pro versed in you know how that would be different from what other people are saying. But I do know I've seen comic creators who's like, the direct market's kind of messing up some stuff here and there.
right. Well,
Right.
because it's not widespread. It's not as widespread as it was when we were kids. We are absolutely
Yeah.
the wrong demo for that. We're the wrong traffic because we know what we want. We would rather have a concentrated store that has
Right.
everything that we're looking for. You know, we're not the kids who are going to be buying these on impulse are begging mom and dad at the local 7-Eleven for
Shout out to
something off
Spinner
a spinner
Racks.
rack. So that like we're the wrong demographic. So we just have to look at it from the perspective of trying to grow the business, trying to grow the hobby. And I definitely understand how some people think that there should be wider distribution. There should be, when I was a kid, you could get comics at the local Walden Books. Not that
Yeah,
there's
no,
a
right?
Walden Books anymore, but you can get it at the Walden Books in the mall. You could get comics at the newsstand. If you lived near a newsstand, you could get them at the convenience store. um I didn't really discover comic book stores until I was in my
Hmm.
early teens. So the direct market, and that I mean, there are several side effects to that, such as my rush to get back issues as a result of that. Once I discovered that, oh, there is a way to get complete my runs of all these comics that I had read as a kid, that maybe I had like a couple of scraps of a collection here and there. That's why I was able to complete my entire New Teen Titans run in college. You know, because I discovered a great comic book store in college, and next thing I know, I was able to complete my entire collection for like less
Right.
than $30.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so that was a huge boon for me. But yeah, like I said, I understand why this might create a
Excuse
change.
me.
It all depends on how. Sorry, it's okay. It all depends
Yeah.
on how long this lasts. It really does. It really does. Because if we start shipping to just online shipping, it's great and all. I'm not a fan of, then we all have to worry about porch pirates.
Yeah, true. No,
That's no fun.
definitely not. Yeah, like 'cause you can kind of see both sides of this, but you definitely know that at some point, well, you would think at some point at the tail end of this, there's going to be I would hope, a change that will kind of split the difference. I kind of doubt that where Diamond is concerned, but
Hmm.
something is going to have to change because yes, this is going to happen right now, and this is happening temporarily, and we don't hopefully don't expect anything like this to happen anytime soon once we get past this, but you should still kind of go the way of like, well, what if it does? Now, whether Diamond's thinking
Right.
about that or just thinking about their bottom line, it is what it is on that one, But hopefully there will be some thoughts as to how things go in, even not right now, definitely right now, but even right now and going through the rest of this, as to how things are going to proceed so far to kind of make things better for everybody all around, creators, collectors, creators, even stores, because like Agent 70 says, like, yeah, I can remember going like Kmart, going to spinner racks and like getting Archie books and getting stuff off spinner racks, going to the 7-Eleven, getting stuff off spinner racks, and like you could just find comics at a couple other places, and like you know, finding that comic store, just so happened to be going downtown and finding a comic store, um, you know, to feed my fix when I was little and I couldn't drive and I had to get my mom to drive me over there. Yeah, no, and going there every week, which is next to this, I thought was a devil store, but that's a whole nother story for a whole nother time. Ended up being a store that I
Right.
ended up
I
going
mean,
into a few different times.
right. I mean, like I'm betraying my age here, but definitely in the age of New York that I grew up in, it still wasn't
Mm.
the safest place. So it wasn't as easy to maybe drag my parents to a legit comic book store. So the best I got was a really
Yeah,
well stocked
and
newsstand,
newsstands. Yeah.
which was still great. Right.
Hmm.
Which was still great. Don't get me wrong, because, if you're lucky enough, to have a parent who's like, all right, just pick a bunch, and you just start picking them out of the rack.
Yeah.
That's just awesome. You can't even understand how
Hmm.
much fun
Hell, I
that
even miss
was.
newsstand. I mean, I don't know
You
how it
know,
is in New York, but there's not like there was this place called Capital Newsstand, which had a couple of stores here. There was one downtown and one closer here to me. Um, that I would go get books for a good time before I found out there was a couple other comic books that was relatively close. And yeah, just like you, it was
sure.
like, wow. And at that time, I think I was actually a teen and could drive myself. So I was like, well, shoot, I was just going every week to the newsstand because the other place that I was just that mentioned prior had closed, and the other place that took over for it kind of was not necessarily around or weirdly, and I know I've told that story in the past where it's like, well, they stopped selling new books and that kind of stuff, but they still
Right.
had old books and then change of this, that, whatever. So, but newsstands definitely were a good thing, and I kind of missed them not only just for
Right.
comic books, but just in general.
Sure. I mean, listen, I don't devour. I definitely don't devour the news via the physical
Hmm.
newspaper anymore. I just pull up the New York Times app on my phone,
Right.
on my iPad. I definitely went to the newsstand a lot as a kid. There was I think they were called Optimo,
Mm.
cigars, and a lot of stores had that sign advertising the fact that that they had Optimo cigars, and they were just just not they weren't chains, they were just independently owned newsstands. So um it was a different time. I discovered the direct market sometime in like late junior high school, and was able to partake in the direct market when I got to travel
Right.
more in high school, on my own throughout the
Right.
city. So
That actually kind of real quick remind me of this other place that I ended up finding out about, which was it was down the street from here from me, like way down the street. It was kind of, I don't even know how I came across it, but I know I was driving at the time. But it was just a little house looking store, like a little one or two looking house looking store. You go in and it was all smoke filled, but there was a bunch of long boxes in there with comic books, and the dude was just smoking and whatnot. And I was like, this doesn't seem like this could go, after knowing what, it's like you might want to protect the books. But he had racks and racks, stacks and stacks of books, but also had that one section with the porn stuff in it. But we're not going to get into that part. That was, yeah,
or well, this is when it was far more acceptable to
right.
be in a smoke filled room. So we all grew up with it. We probably all have evidence of that in our
Hmm.
lungs to
But
this day.
but it was from that
So
store that was like, well, I got a little bit off of my back stock. Ended up getting good stuff because he had some fairly decent stuff. It was like, it was still kind of seedy looking inside, but it was like, well, shoot, he got some fairly decent deals until he went out of business or whatever the heck happened, because I know something what thing was. But it was
yeah,
like,
I mean, if that's where you can get them, if that's where you can get them, by
exactly.
all means, right? So, all right. So do
We
we have one more
have actually
story?
two more stories. Because I just put one in there, but it's a real quick one. IDW suspend. Well, actually, you do that one because I'll do this last one since I got it and you don't.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, this is just real. This is just real quick because this is more COVID-19 fallout. IDW Publishing has responded to Diamond Comics' distributors announced plans to cease accepting and distributing new products beginning April 1st. In the statement, IDW President, Publisher, CCO Chris Royale offers new extended dates for returnability of IDW product and has announced plans to suspend publication of its planned releases scheduled for May 6th through May 27th while shrinking its overall line into July. That is practical and pragmatic. That is definitely something that we're all going to have to deal with
Yeah,
for the next several months as all
yeah.
businesses try to cope
They're
with
basically
this.
saying they're tightening their belts, to kind of weather the storm. So you got to do what you got to do.
Right.
So, last but not least, Neil Gaiman gives LeVar Burton, quote unquote, blanket permission to read his stories online. So, writer Neil Gaiman has given actor LeVar Burton his seal of approval to read any of his stories for Burton's live streaming reading sections, which he's been doing the last, I don't know how long. And obviously, if you don't know LeVar Burton from Star Trek: The Next Generation, you definitely know him from reading Rainbow. Uh,
Reading
exactly. So
Rainbow.
So
Reading
no slouch in the
Rainbow.
reading in the reading category there, and you can see the tweet from between LeVar Burton. Oh wait, so basically, let's see. LeVar Burton,
Take a look. It's in a book.
LeVar Burton put out a tweet says, in order to avoid legal complications, I've gone down the rabbit hole searching through volumes of short stories in the public domain for appropriate content for families and have come up empty. And then Neil Gaiman says, you have my blanket permission for any of my stories, LeVar. So he can basically do that. in his live streaming sections, which I've not checked out any of them, but nevertheless, it's LeVar Burton, it's reading Vanguard. You know what it is. So if you had a chance to check that out, go for it. That's pretty cool. It's called LeVar Burton Reads. I have heard of it. If you have not heard of it, you can go check that out at your leisure. Yep.
That's cool.
And with that, we come to the end of another episode of the Comic Book Chronicles, but we have one more ad read.
Our last ad read of the night is for something we're probably all using. But shout out to the workers who may not be feeling so well in the warehouses. Please take care of yourself. Keep our podcast free by shopping at Amazon. Visit cspn.us, then click the Keep Our Podcast Free link at the top of the page. From there, scroll down and click on the Amazon link to shop. Purchase items from Amazon as you normally would, whether it's books, music, electronics, jewelry, apparel, etc. For every purchase made on Amazon through our link, Amazon sends this. That helps us keep the Comic Book Chronicles podcast free for our listeners at no extra cost to you. Amazon.com through cspn.us. Do it today.
And with that, folks, we come to another end of a show. We will be back here next week with some more books. We do know we will have books next week. After that, we'll see what happens. We've definitely got stuff we could be doing. We definitely got a show that could be put in the pipeline if we ever, or if ever we the rest of us get on off our laurels. But we would definitely, have.
I mean, they can get off their butts because I already filled the sheet.
Well, yes, there is that. But we can definitely, we could probably try to figure out some treasure editions or something to do. But regardless, folks,
no topic. We are open for business. Right. So don't be shy to chime in if you guys have anything you want to talk about. Feel free to reach out to us on the social media handles that Roddycat is about to go through.
And that goes as followed. You can follow me at Roddycat on Twitter and News Nerds Need on Twitter, and also CB Caps on Instagram. Agent_70 on Twitter and Instagram. PC_Dirt on Twitter. Pop Culture Network on Twitter, Pop Culture Net on Twitter, popculturenetwork.com, and his umbrella sites therein. Also, the Vine alternative Byte under, that's BYTE, under Comic Book Reviews, no vowels. The Cyrus of this ish. Tim, DOGG98 on Twitter. CB Cron on Twitter, that is the Comic Book Chronicles Twitter account. The Click Nation on Twitter and theclicknation.com. That's TheKlickNation. And of course, Comic Book Resources, where he is over there writing his face off. You can find this here podcast at the Cold Slither Podcast Network at cspn.us.
Do it today.
You can also find this here podcast on your podcast perusal place of choice, such as Google Play, Apple iTunes, aka Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and the Cold Slither Podcast Network's SoundCloud page. We'll be back next week, folks. It will be... Wait, is it going to be... No, it's going to be April 2nd. I was about to say, geez, we're coming back on April Fool's Day. But we'll be coming back.
Right. April 1st is going to be the release date for new comics that we're not going to get.
Exactly. So, stay tuned. It should be an interesting show one way or another. Until then, we will see you. This has been the Comic Book Chronicles. Peace.
Peace. One.
I love it when a plan comes together.